Casual Magic has been brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can get cool stuff. Use the code CASUAL for 5% off your order. We're also sponsored by Quiver Time, makers of the Quiver and Bolt deck cases and other fine card-holding accessories. Use the code CASUAL on their site for 10% off your purchase. And by Architect, a deck hosting website that doesn't sell anything, but they like me and I like them, so kindly use them for all your deck list needs. Now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to Casual Magic, the show where we talk about the fun side of Magic the Gathering. My name is Shivam Button. Casual Magic is brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., Architect, and Quiver. Today I have a really rad guest, a dude I've been reading on Twitter for like a long time, I guess. One of my favorite humorists and I guess also, TV writer and former video game journalist and whatnot, Mike Drucker, who I've brought on because you're really funny and I like talking to funny people.
Oh, thank you very much. And hello, everybody. If you hear this voice, it's mine.
Cool. This is both video and audio podcast. I realized it turns out people like seeing people.
Oh, yeah. If you're watching this right now, I know this doesn't look good. My podcast, like the light I use for podcasts, literally as I was setting everything up, I turned it on and it didn't turn on. I'm not going to go through the whole story. So now I'm using like a depression lamp that's pointed at my face.
Man, when I started, I would have my cell phone just kind of with the flash on pointing at my face, and I would look like one of those people telling a haunted horror story, like
right.
The candle is uplit, and I'm like, this is not going to work. Then I realized if I record during the day, I can just have the sun pointing at my face, and it turns out that's a good light source.
Yeah. I get no sun in my apartment. I'm like, it's sunny out, but if I open those blinds, you'd think it was like 9 p.m.
That's the joy of New York, right? Like you open your window and it's a lovely view of an alleyway between two shadowy big buildings, and it's
literally,
yeah. Hey, look, I'm sure there's someone here. It's like when you go to a hotel and you're like, look, I have a scenic view of the parking lot. Like, well,
exactly.
It's like, yeah, it's like, this wasn't the garden I was thinking I was getting the view of, but we take what we can get, right?
Exactly.
So are you familiar with Magic the Gathering?
I am.
You randomly started following my Magic feed, which is not something that people often do.
I am. I started playing in the 5th grade in the early 90s, or I guess mid 90s, really. I played the first edition I played was Revised Edition. Yeah, and I was huge into it. I was really into it. I mean, if you look at my cards, I still have my cards, and I'm sure they're worth something, but they're also like heavily damaged. Clearly, they've been put on like a
sidewalks,
school concrete floor. Yeah, exactly. Like white borders, but sort of black little dots all over it from just use. Cards that I'm too lazy to look up, but
right.
But I really loved it. I was introduced to it by a friend who kind of cheated me once or twice.
That is the best way to learn. It's like when 3 weeks later, when you figured out the game, you're like, hey, wait a second, you just totally jobbed me. It's like, I mean, look, bygones be bygones. We're friends, right? It's cool. Yeah. It's funny because like I just got this Shivan dragon. Finally, I've wanted it since I was in like 7th grade or whatever in middle school, and somebody sent me one. I'm like, I could have probably just went and bought one, but that doesn't feel right.
It doesn't feel the same.
Yeah, it's like
I actually traded one for 5 lands. That's how my friend ripped me off, man. I was like a child. So when he's like, that's not worth anything, just trade it for these. I was like, all right, sure.
Oh,
I know.
I just got visceral memories of how terrible we were as children. Just like, oh yeah, of course. No, you don't need that. Here, you can't play it without lands anyway. Here's some land. You'll be fine. It's great. Here's 5 of them. 5 is more than 1, right? Like,
and also like I was never like a baseball card kid or anything, so I was never like, these are going to be worth money someday. I was just like, okay, this is the best way for me to play according to my friend. That's how I play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like, that's how we lose our things in our backpacks, and you have your sandwich bag and rubber bands full of Magic cards and whatever.
Yep.
Like, oh, God, when I sit and actually think about the monetary value of cards that either just threw away or lost or got jacked on, we're just like,
Yep.
Let's not talk about that mortgage payment, shall we? But yeah, the thing is, though, that's part of what I wanted to talk to you. Part of it is just because you are a mega nerd, and more importantly, you're also just somehow managed to be one of the funniest people on Twitter
Thank you.
without being like drill tier annoying. And goodness gracious me. Um, did you stumble into just deciding to do Twitter humor?
Yes and no. I started doing stand up before Twitter was a thing. Like only a couple years before it was a thing, but and when it came out, it was kind of for someone like me who wanted to be a comedy writer, who liked writing jokes, who liked doing comedy. It's sort of like at the time was like, the perfect vehicle for jokes. It's since turned
Right.
into, a
Hell.
nightmare. Yeah. But also like like a little while ago, like I was like, I just want to see something, and I've been on like because you know how Twitter will say how long you've been on it. I've been on longer than Elon Musk, so I'm like, you know what? It's mine. It's fine. I can. This is my platform. But I don't know. It just clicked with me. I liked the writing style, and at the time, I
Yeah.
was trying to become. I was trying to become like a writer for The Onion, or like Weekend Update, and so writing short little
Pithy jokes.
pithy jokes really helped me. So it kind of just dovetailed with my comedy career kind of well.
Yeah, it's like it's weird because I found that when I got on Twitter at first, I was like, that was when everybody's just posting lunch pictures and like, I don't know, this is like AIM, but with everybody listening, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
and what I realized is that I'm a priest and a storyteller and like a progressive activist beside magic stuff, which is weird because like I come from the video games industry, which where all priests come from. But it's like I discovered Twitter back when it only had like the hyper character limitation of like 120 characters, whatever.
Yeah.
Was A, it forced you to edit yourself.
Yeah.
B, was a fantastic way for my style of storytelling, which is I like to, oral type of like conversational stories. And that gives you pauses for breathing and timing. And what I realized is when I'm like, so just to give you 10-second background, it's like, so I'm a Hindu priest, and I'm also like one of the major progressive Hindus in America, and also one of the few who speaks English. And so one of the things I was like, there's a lot of weird propaganda from like right wingers and like the neo Nazis in India who are doing all this stuff, but nobody's telling these stories. Let me just go and see what happens when I start doing that. And I started using Twitter, and it turned out Twitter is a perfect vehicle for me to be able to tell these long, rambly stories that people will just latch onto and start following along,
Yeah.
which is how I got my like non-magic following. And I was like, this is so good. And then everybody just lit it on fire and ruined it forever.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I've compared it to like a bar where everyone's like, "This is a great bar," and then like the town villain buys the bar, and
Right?
you're like, "Well, this is still the bar that I'm used to, and a lot of my friends still go here, but man, this bar sucks now." Like that's
Yeah,
the feeling of it. Like, yeah, there's
exactly.
other bars open, but do I really want to go to like that bar? Or I'll go to
Right.
the bar, then I'll be like, but this one's close to my house.
I mean, so they pour kerosene in the vodka once in a while. It's fine, right? Like,
Yeah.
it sucks though, because like now we're in this weird balkanization. Everybody's going to like, okay, well, go to Blue Sky or Threads or Mastodon or I don't know, whatever
Yeah.
your mom's house. Like, dude, next they're gonna be like, let's bring back Live Journal and like my no.
Oh man.
Oh,
Live journal.
dude, I checked my Live Journal the other day, and it's still there because I bought a subscription 30 years ago or whatever, and it's like reading your diaries from when you were a child, because I was like 20 and thought I was the smartest guy in the world, and
Yep.
wow, wow, I'm glad that nobody looks at that anymore.
Oh yeah, there's definitely things I've deleted where I'm like, I've grown as a person and also am going to delete this.
Yeah, turns out we don't need to leave a full record of everything we've ever said. Sometimes you can just say, you know what, I am a better person now.
Yes.
That doesn't need to exist.
Right.
Yeah, but you probably run into that a lot though, because if you're just sitting there and BSing on Twitter, you're have you ever run into situations where you're just like, whoops, I stepped in something I did not intend to?
Sure. Usually even when I'm like getting into some histrionic fight, I'm kind of sure of my ground, but there's occasionally, been things where we've all done it where you tweet something but you're not thinking of maybe, a certain person that might be affected by it. Nothing not like a joke that was so severe someone got upset, but sometimes when it's like, that wasn't the best phrasing.
Yeah.
Um I haven't really had a pylon. You know, no, I have. I have had a pylon, but usually it's been when I've like, you know, tweeted something that wasn't even a joke, where it's like, I'm willing to pay more taxes for like, you know,
Yeah,
Medicare for all, and then people
all the
just
blue checks are
jump
just
in.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the sort of thing, like, definitely there are times when you're like, I am defending this one group or idea, and in doing so, I accidentally
Hmm.
hammered this other group I totally forgot about, and it's like, "Oh, balls."
Yeah.
But, like, I don't know, b as a brown guy on Twitter who lived through Gamergate, I have had my share of, Nazi pylons,
Oh, I'm
but there's
sure.
also yeah. And it turns out that being a prominent Magic guy means that there's a lot of people who are very, A, angry that they're not here, and B, also like, "Hey, what the hell do you know? Who are you? Also, let's pile on the brown guy." And it's like, you're
Absolutely. Yeah.
mad at them, the big company. I am not even affiliated with them. I just talk on the Twitters.
Right.
So you're going to yell at me because I here, I guess.
Also, what you do, they could try to do if they just put in the effort. It's not
Sure.
like your dad is like, you know,
Yeah.
Richard Garfield. You know, like where you're like, that's not fair, man.
Right,
Like,
exactly. It's this used to happen to me in the games industry too, where it'd be like, I'm like, "Oh, I work for IGN or EGM," and it's like, "What the hell do you know? I could do that." "Great, do it,
go
please."
for it.
Like, we need more good writers. Come on, I'll introduce you to Parrish and Walker, whatever, whatever. No, we just don't like you. I'm like, that's fine too. I'm still gonna do it because I have to pay San Francisco rent. Um,
God, yeah.
I don't know who decided to put all the game publications in the Bay Area where none of us can afford to live, and it's like my first year when I was working at One Up, I was literally paying to go into the office and be an intern there because my train ticket to go from my house to the place and whatever was more than what they were paying me weekly. And I'm like, I feel like this is exploitation, but I'm also getting to play Street Fighter before everybody else. Trade
Y-
offs.
Yeah. Yeah. I only had 1 year at IGN. And I definitely, when I moved to San Francisco for it, and I remember moving to San Francisco and getting my apartment, being like, "Oh, this is gonna be a rough journey. This is
Oh
gonna
yeah,
be a real rough journey." And I loved like the people I worked with, but San Francisco was not the city for me. Everything, and not the usual reason people complain. It's just like the public transit ain't as great as I want it to be, and I don't like walking uphill both ways like I'm a grandfather.
yeah.
You know,
People
wasn't for me.
forget that San Francisco is like both like 49 miles square, and also every square mile of that is just some gigantic uber steep hill.
Yes, yes.
And like a friend of mine who's in the Magic community came to visit a few weeks ago, and he's from England. And I was just driving him around San Francisco, showing him the Golden Gate Bridge and this, that, and the other thing. And we're driving in my like Prius, and we're going up one of these hills, which has this like 85-degree angle,
Oh no.
where it's like the street thing says like make sure you have your handbrakes. I'm like, this car doesn't have a handbrake; it's a Prius, man. It's like the handbrake is me getting out and holding it. And we're at like the top of the hill, and the light turned red, so I can't go forward. And I'm just like pedal to the floor, and he's like holding on for dear life, like, in England, our streets aren't vertical. And I'm like, welcome to San Francisco. But when we get high here, we mean multiple ways. Uh, um, yeah, it's weird. It's a lovely city until all the tech people came, and then it became Tech City, and
Yeah,
now it's like, oh, we can't afford to live here, huh?
yeah.
Yeah. And of course, Elon Musk likes to block our streets periodically and try to change the signs of Twitter, and it gets funny.
Without getting a permit, no
Dude,
less.
like San Francisco is the most anal city in the world when it comes to like building things. So they're going to stop you no matter what you're doing. So
Right.
the idea that he spent like $100,000 getting cranes and then just got to stop
Definitely.
makes me laugh. But it also is a pain in the ass to actually get anywhere because then
Yeah.
you're like, oh, you're there. You are. Um, Dude, it's weird because I used to work for a company that was owned by Walmart, and across the street from me was a Twitter San Jose office, which
Oh,
is like the place that nobody thinks about because that's where all the like Indian and Chinese engineers who are actually running Twitter are.
yeah.
The guys who don't care what your tweet is or what your handle is, they just need the service to run. And you go in and you're like, public face of Twitter is all these like young, athletic white guys who are like, yeah, I'm cutting edge and everything. And then you're like, the people who are actually working in the real one are just a bunch of dudes driving minivans or soccer moms or whatever, who are just like, look, I don't care what the company name is. I'm just here to tech the server. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, this is so weird. It's just like a bunch of random immigrants are running Nazi town, and it's like, well, here we go. Um, sorry, I
uh,
didn't mean to bring you to my stand-up show. I don't know what I'm
oh
doing.
no, no, you're quite all right. You are all right.
Um, Stand-up's a hard gig. It's hard to stand in front of people and actually make them laugh. That's not a thing I do. That's why I'm on Twitter.
You get used to it after a while. You get used to it. You just do it long enough. And like I did a show last night that was a fun show, but it was like a huge thunderstorm in New York.
Oh
There was
god.
like not a big audience, and sometimes when you bomb, you kind of know it's you, and sometimes when you bomb, you're just like, guys, we all know this is weird. Like it's a little more of a communal experience.
Yeah.
You just get used to it. You sort of understand, and it's not like perfect or anything. My feelings will still get hurt, but you kind of get a better understanding of why you failed, what you might have done wrong. You just get more like situational awareness, which helps calm the anxiety, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because like, you learn to read the room, right? Like, you
Yeah,
learn to be
exactly.
able to see their kind of emotions and their body language. And because I remember I went to a Hari Kondabolu show,
Oh, I
and,
love Hari.
he's funny as hell. He's like
He's such a
he
great good dude.
he he speaks my language, he speaks to my people. I mean, I'm huge fan of him, and it was in Santa Cruz, which is a very white town, and all the people there were, like, Hari's NPR fans, right? Like, people who were like, "Yeah, he comes and yells about power and anti-capitalism and down with the racism and whatever," and he was coming up and doing a really great set about, like, mangoes and Indian
Weezer.
things. Yeah, and
Did he do
everybody
his Weezer bit?
yes, and also, like, bits about his dad and things like that. It was
Yeah.
like, I was dying. I was also the brownest dude in the room, and all the ladies in there were just like, he swears a lot, you know? And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Bro, this is a stand-up show. This is not like him doing a podcast or NPR." And he just, like, immediately read that the room was just cold fish dead, and I was like, "Oh, man, you're doing so good. Please don't." And yeah, and then so he went through his whole act again and was just like, "Where did I lose you?" And I was like, "Oh, no. Oh,
But
no."
that's such a fun move to do.
Oh, yeah.
Like the one of the hardest things in stand up is to not just navigate a situation that's not great, but to try to if not have fun, appear to have fun doing it.
Mm,
Cuz the reason that sometimes I'll look at an audience and be like, "Hey, I feel weird too right now," is sort of to let them know that I know. And there's two ways to let an audience know. Like there's one that's sort of like, "Hey, we're going to try to get through this. Like let's see where I went wrong," which Hari did, which is right. And the other
yeah,
way, which I dislike, is when people are like, "What's wrong with you?" And
right.
that shuts people down more. Like when you try
Yeah,
to go like, "Hey, it's weird for both of us. Let's figure it out." People are a little more willing to open,
right.
but it's the moment you crap on them for being in the audience, especially one of my pet peeves is like, at a show like this, if there's 3 or 4 or 5 people, sometimes you'll see a stand up. This didn't happen at this show, but you'll see a stand up that'll be like, you guys, you're the only ones here. And it's like, yeah, they're the ones who showed
You
up.
showed up.
Don't be mad at the people who actually came. Be mad at the people who didn't. Sure. If you have 20 reservations and 5 show ups, be mad at those 15. Why are you mad at the people watching?
Right, like, they actually put in the effort to come.
Right.
They want to see you. Give them what you've got. If nothing else, use it as a practice, right?
Right. Or they don't want to feel bad for it. They don't want to feel like they ruined their night,
Yeah.
you know?
I remember there's this huge music act in India called Salim Sulaiman. They're like huge Bollywood producers. They put on like stadium level shows in all over the world. And they came to California to do a show. And the promoter was Jank, and they put him in like a small community center room. Like it was like going to like a church hall, and these guys are playing, they've got pyrotechnics and they've got the whole setup, and they're looking at this like, so it's going to be an intimate show tonight. I get it.
Yeah.
Okay. And there were like maybe, 50 or 60 diehards in the audience. And they're like, well, you know what? We're putting on a show. We brought all this crap here. So good luck and strap in. And it was like one of the best shows I've ever seen, because they were like, look, I get it. We're in like, the Elks Lodge. We're going to put on like you're in like, Yankee Stadium, because I'm not going to waste this chance to just practice my craft. And I was like, that is how you get out of a crappy situation, man.
Exactly.
That's professionalism. Um,
100%.
yeah, and I was like, "Wow, that's also really hard to do, because like, when you're expecting the energy of a large room versus
Yeah.
the energy of a small room, very different."
And it throws you off. It
Yeah,
absolutely throws you off. Almost the way it might throw you off if you were doing a job interview or on a first date where you say something and then they do that little reaction where it might not be an outwardly negative one, but you're like, oh, okay, okay, I gotta, you
You're
sort
like,
of
"Let
you
me
get
dial
hit
back,
by it.
let's"
Yeah, exactly.
First dates and job interviews, literally the same thing, but, it's I mean, you're interviewing for somebody's length of time and resources,
Yeah.
and, good luck with that.
There's no sign greater that I'm a robot than I said first dates and job interviews is the same category of human interaction.
But it's true, though, it's true. I mean, I say that as if I've been on one date. I mean, I've had one girlfriend in my life, and I've been married to her for 20 years, so I don't have any room to talk. Like, you're not gonna get any, like, relationship jokes out of this. I got none. But it's I like that though, first date job interview. I'm gonna have to remember. So, what do you actually do? I forgot to tell the audience, who are you and why are you
who
here?
who am I? Who I don't know. That's something I ask myself. I am well. Usually, my main job is I'm a television writer.
Oh, that's well,
Currently, I'm on strike.
yeah, that would usually be cool.
Yeah.
Right now, I wish you the best of luck and, down with Disney and Friends.
Thank you very much. I mean, luckily, I have earned enough this year where my I have health insurance for a year.
Oh
So
god, yeah.
the weird thing is, and then I'll get into actually what I do is with this strike is it's a sad state of society when people are like, "How you doing?" I'm like, "I'm lucky I don't have a family." You know what I mean? And mean that.
That's
Like
funny.
and not mean it like not sarcastic, but sort of like, if this goes on, it only affects me. And I know that a lot of people, most people don't have that privilege necessarily. And I'm not like, I hope it goes on forever.
Yeah, no,
But
you
it's
want
a
your
weird
colleagues
feeling.
to not suffer.
Right, exactly. But it's still a weird feeling to be like, oh, okay. All right, I'm gonna finish Final Fantasy 16. Um, Usually, I'm a TV writer. I've written for The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon, also Late Night
Oh,
with Jimmy Fallon before it was The Tonight Show. Adam Ruins Everything. I was head writer and executive producer on Full Frontal with Samantha Bee.
oh, that's
Um,
rad.
yeah, and like a couple other things, award shows here or there. And before that, I worked at IGN for a year doing theoretically funny videos for them.
Hmm.
And then before that, I was at Nintendo of America as a localization guy.
Oh, so then you probably do know a lot of people that I know, because I know a lot of people who do loc at Nintendo as well.
Probably, yeah.
Uh, which is we I mean, look, the video game industry is very, very small.
Yeah.
Like, people don't realize how small it is when they're like, "Oh, you're at IGN, shouldn't you be hating the guys at EGM?" I'm like, "Dude, we go to lunch together. Like, our offices are next door. What do you want?" Like, it's like, if I lose this job, I'm going to that job, so it's just kind of
Exactly.
yeah. And I mean, it's like that in like I think the entertainment as a whole is just like it's way smaller than you think, and everybody works at everybody else's company, and we don't have time for rivalries because we need those contacts to get gigs when we lose our last one, right?
Yeah.
Like I was at Voodoo before this, like for 10 years, and so I used to work with like studios in Hollywood to figure out, oh, these shows are coming out, let me market them and sell them or whatever. And so that means I need to deal with people like Netflix and Apple and blah blah. And they're like, aren't they your rivals? I'm like, they're my boss's rivals.
Yeah.
They're just my colleagues in this industry because we all are suffering in capitalism in San Jose.
Yeah.
Um,
100, and
yeah.
shows are like that too, where they're like, "Oh, you guys must," like when you're on like Tonight Show, they're like, "You must hate Stephen Colbert," and it's like, No, those are our friends that we do comedy with at night.
Exactly.
Like
Like,
we know those people. It's
who do
fine."
you go drinking with after the show, right? Like, come on. Okay, so I'm curious though, because I've always wanted to know when you have to work for somebody like Fallon and it's a daily every night or like every afternoon or whatever you're doing your taping. So when you're trying to write these monologues and write these like pithy, topical jokes, does that mean you're getting up at like the crack of dawn and reading like a dozen newspapers or something? How do you do this?
um, you it changes show to show, so there's not like one solid set system.
Mm,
But I would say sort of like to generalize smudge it to be sort of the average of them all. Usually shows will send you like like a list of a couple pages of topics,
mm,
and usually it's almost like the headline, it'll be like, today, XYZ, or Halloween experts say this year people are going to spend X number of dollars, or, all those things, whether it's holiday,
sure.
pop culture. And off that, you can usually, based off your own knowledge of the world, kind of suss out what the big story is. So you can be like, all right, I'm going to pitch on this, whatever is happening. And then,
Barbenheimer.
right, exactly. I'm sure there would have been a lot of
Oh,
Barbenheimer
yeah,
stuff
like,
all over.
maybe the only upside to the Barbenheimer to the strike is the fact that we didn't get, like, SNL's version of a Barbenheimer sketch, and I'm like, "Oh, thank God."
We would have all been bombarding
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of Barbenheimer stuff. And you know what? I would have been on that boat driving straight along with them because I like to make a living.
Fact, fact.
Fact. But yeah, so usually you pitch stuff during the morning, and some stuff is has a longer tail. So like sometimes, it'll be like, hey, we're gonna shoot something with Ryan Reynolds in 4 weeks. Can you guys
Mm.
give us a sketch that we could produce for him? And
Oh,
that's a longer tail because like sometimes there's a bigger set you have to build, or like special effects, or go through approval of like a song or something. So sometimes like those big production songs, those will have a little more of a production time. But like
sure.
short sketches, monologues, you're just really just writing them on the fly. And if the news breaks, sometimes you're like writing up to the last minute.
That must be crazy. If it's like, "Oh, hey, we went to war 10 minutes before taping. Well, I guess we're making bomb jokes. Let's go."
I mean, seriously. Although I will say that the more of an emergency it is, it's not that I like it more, but the more it feels like the way television was working in television was promised to me on television. Because like there's boring days where you're like, all right, it's like 3 o'clock, and we tape at 5, and
Got nothing.
I guess I'll work on an idea. But like there's days where it's like, we gotta go. He's about to be on stage now, and those are
Oh.
kind of the exciting moments because you're like, oh, showbiz. I'm gonna run out on stage with an idea. Those are always
Dude,
fun.
you say that, but, like, so when I worked at, Sony PlayStation, I was one of the people in charge of doing their sizzle reels and stuff for E3. I used to do, like, video trailers and whatever, and there was, like, we would be, like, what the heck is it? Gran Turismo 5 was coming up, and I had to, like, make the trailer and cut it and do the big launch announce, and we would have to send it to Japan for approval, and this was before
Oh
there were,
yeah.
like, fast speeds and stuff, so it's, like, transmitting, like, terabytes of data over friggin' FTP or something, and then wait 17 hours for them to look at it, download it, and re-upload it, and they're like, "Oh, you need to fix this little blur on this thing." I'm like, "Oh, god damn it." And whatever. But the thing is, because of that sizzle reel that year, we literally had to run from the Bay Area down to LA to get to E3, literally plugging in the hard drive
Yep.
in the back while the president is like, "And now our lineup for this year," and we're like,
Ta-da!
"Click," and then you're just like, "And now I'm gonna die for the next 10 days. Don't talk to me."
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's like that is definitely showbiz right there, where you're like just running out there for the
Running.
ticker tape. It's like, no, really? God, can you imagine if damn you, like Elon, like doing all this X crap on a weekend during the writer's strike when
Uh,
everybody's like, this is free, it's
uh,
free
it's
material.
so much to work with.
Oh,
On the other hand, though, there is something nice where like I definitely had a point, like during the submarine stuff where I was like, you know what, I'm just glad we don't have to figure out a way to navigate this.
oh, oh, God, yeah, because people would have tried some really heinous jokes,
Right. They
and
would, because the assumption at first was that they live too, that they're at the bottom, so there would have maybe been, and I don't necessarily
yeah.
know in like a show I was on or someone else, but it would have been discussions.
Oh yeah, somebody would have tried to. Ooh, that would have. Yeah, let's just say that that's a good dodge right there.
Whew.
That's a stealth move.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because did you get to work on Fallon when he was doing like the things where he would get musicians to come on and then they would hit the random button and like have to sing songs in weird styles?
Yeah, I've definitely been there during that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I realize that that's not really a question that goes anywhere, but it's also just my favorite bit on Fallon is watching singers like try to sing the ABCs like they're the Bee Gees or something like that, and you're like, ah, let's go. Oh my
It
god,
is
that means you
always,
must have hung out with the Roots
yeah.
or
I've hung out.
in
I played mini
proximity of the
golf.
Roots.
I played mini golf with the Roots.
That's rad.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I like the Roots a lot.
they're great.
Yeah, I'm sad they sold out and went to Fallon, but also they need to pay rent too, and he probably pays quite a lot to them. So, getting an actual band to be like your show band is pretty wild.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
and they're
hustlers out there.
good. They're
Yeah,
really
they're
good.
really good.
I also think that part of them was like, we're because they are also also getting older. So I think they were like, we're parents with kids. Maybe we'll take a
Right.
more like steady musician gig
Yeah,
and have a
right.
lot of money.
Exactly. It's like doing a Vegas residency, except you're still in New York and you don't have to play in Vegas, which, is probably great unless you're, Britney Spears or something who's
Yeah,
getting infinite money. Um, so you're writing a book though? Did I know you went and wrote for my friend Jeremy Parrish who's,
yeah.
does like God, what the hell is this thing called? Limited run games or something
Limited
like that?
run games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's one of my dearest friends and, like, the guy who got me into, like, all this stuff. So it was super cool when I saw that you were just writing a book for them. Like, what did you actually write on?
So, so
Like
they came to. So previously, I'd written one book for Boss Fight Books about Silent Hill 2, and that
mm.
was a little more academic. It was really the one time I've used my master's degree. But it was, that was super fun.
Ah,
And
that's a games industry right there, man. Like, all of us are overeducated
yeah,
and talking about bubble bubble, and it's like, well, yeah,
but we get to do what we hoped we'd do as kids, which is nice.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so for this, uh, Jeremy and Jared, who work there, they came to me and they were like, "Hey, would you be interested in writing a funny novelization of a game that we're going to release?" And I was like, "Of 100%, absolutely." And so they were like, they specified for like one of those re-releases of a bad game, or quote unquote bad game, like the FMV type games that are a little corny from the early 90s. And so I like, pitched a couple ideas, and then they were like, "Well, we completely bought the IP to Plumbers Don't Wear Ties. So we own it outright. So you wouldn't have to get approvals for it past us. There's no corporation we have to like send materials to. It's all ours." And I was like, "Great. That makes my life a lot easier if I'm not dealing with corporate notes." And so I wrote
Wait,
uh,
Plumbers Only Wear Ties
it was
that
a
was a 3DO game, right?
3DO and I think DOS maybe game. Uh, it was supposed to be a sort of like romantic sexual thriller.
Oh,
It
Jesus.
is very poorly written. It just there's so many things about it that don't work. And the story goes places that um it would be generous to call problematic. Um and so I like, first of all, I like, went through a bunch of loopholes, steps to get it working so I could play it. And then after I like after that, I was like, I'm just gonna watch a ton of let's plays. This is not
Yeah.
worth me trying to like create a fake computer within my computer. Um,
Yeah, I'm sure that there's some obsessive 3DO out there who's just been like long play of every 3DO game ever made, and you're like, "God bless you, sir, from Kansas, who just sits and plays 3DO games."
Well, fortunately, it's an FMV game that's all choices, so it'll like stop the action and be like, do you do this? Do you do this or this? And so watching a let's play, they actually have like let's plays where they do all the choices. So it was a lot easier to sort of figure out what was happening between different choices that way.
Mm.
Anyway, so I wrote a extraordinarily weird. I don't know how it's gonna go. Like novelization of the game, and it's kind of it sort of has two inspirations in it, and one is I don't know if you remember something called Worlds of Power.
I was just about to bring that up,
Yep.
like because I have the Blaster Master book
Yeah,
from FX9 and all those
that's
Worlds of
right.
Power book. Yes, I
So
remember them well.
so half of it's World of Power, and I don't want to spoil it all, but like when you read it, there's certain points when you're like, oh, this is straight up a 1980s like guidebook type thing, and the other it's it's in the and the other inspiration. And I will say, by the way, Jared and Jeremy were so cool about this. Like I like they had real notes, they had great suggestions, but like I genuinely expected them to be like, actually, this was a mistake. You're not mad if we don't do this, right? And I'd be like, I'm still expecting them to be like, this was a mistake. And I'm like, I'll just release it as fan fiction. Um, it's not that big of a deal, guys. And the other inspiration is a guy named Harry Stephen Keeler, who was a famously bad detective writer in the 30s. He was sort of a pulp writer, but you could tell he was paid by the word because he just wrote like insane, weird sentences, things that didn't make sense, would jump to strange places. And you can find his books pretty cheap because he was very bad at it. But there's kind of an insanity quality. And the thing is, the reality of it was he was just like, I'm paid by the word, so I'm just gonna first draft, last draft, send it off. Like he would have murder mysteries that didn't tell you the solution, and not because it was an artistic choice, but it just wasn't in there.
He was like, "Look, man, my contract says 450 words. That's what you're getting."
Exactly. Um, and so that sort of there's an insanity to it, almost like an Ed Wood type feeling of it, where
Oh
there's
god.
almost a beauty behind the insanity. And so I kind of took some of that as well. Yeah,
Well, I mean, plumbers don't wear ties isn't exactly the deepest like source well, right?
exactly.
Like there's not a lot of work. God, FMV games suck so much. They were so bad.
They were bad.
Like,
They've gotten better. Like games like Immortality are amazing, but it took 25 years.
yeah, well, it took people to actually grow up, appreciate the form, and know what they're doing,
Yeah.
as opposed to back then where it's like, "Hey, this CD player will let me change tracks. What if I just put a picture on it?"
But
And
that
it's
was so exciting when we were kids.
you know what? Choose your own adventure novels were also exciting when I was a kid, and I didn't need to watch some half-assed acting to get through those. Um, God, because like I have a child, so I've been looking through some of my older books to give him to read, and I went back and I reread some of those choose your own adventure books, and I was like, "Oh, this is garbage.
Yeah.
Like this is actively bad,
Hmm.
and also probably very racist in multiple different ways
Oh
that I
yes.
didn't recognize in the '80s."
Oh yes.
And you're like, "Oh, and this art is not. This is not okay in 2023. So I'm going to put this away, and we're not going to talk about it ever again."
What's
Um,
worse is it's probably like racism you forgot about. You're like, oh, it's
yeah.
old racism too.
Oh, yeah, it's just, like, weird Cold War racism and, like, just, like, "Wh
Exactly.
what what have you ever met an Asian person in your life? What are you doing? Like, what is this?"
I still remember my favorite part of the Metal Gear Solid, not Solid, Metal Gear novelization for kids was
Oh,
when it decided Solid Snake's name was Jeremy. Clearly, an audible that author made just at the last second was like, let's give him a name. We can't call him
Jeremy
Solid
Snake.
Snake. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
They called me solid in high school. I'm like, "I don't wanna know about your high school, buddy, or anything ever." Jeremy, Jesus
Don't call
Christ.
me Snake. Snake's my dad's name. Call me Jeremy.
Oh my goodness.
Don't die. I do not want to kill you. That's not my goal here.
It wouldn't be hard. It wouldn't be hard these days. These lingering coughs just like it's not COVID. It turns out that you can just get normal colds and they suck.
Yeah.
And it's like, "Oh, I had forgotten about normal colds.
Yeah.
Oh, this sucks. Why does everything hurt?"
That well, like during COVID, like I'm someone who naturally just coughs a lot. Like if I like, not like choke or gag, but just like I'm someone who's just kind of like,
Yeah,
you know, um,
dry throat, it happens.
yeah. And so the first year of COVID, whenever I was out in public and like I'd be like, I'd be like, it's not, I'm okay, guys, I'm okay. Don't like almost this fear that I would make everyone turn on me.
Oh,
I don't
yeah,
know.
it was the worst. It's like, "Dude, I'm just clearing my throat. You know what that sounds like. I'm not coughing. It's
Nope.
just yellow phlegm coming out. Relax." I mean, it's still gross, but relax. Also, those masks, turns out they catch things from the inside as well as the outside, and that is gross.
Yeah.
That is like where you're like, "Oh, I just coughed into my mask and I have to wear this for another 3 hours. Oh,
Oh
I
yeah,
hate my life."
definitely. Especially like
Um,
a wet cough.
oh, yeah, it's like so we're gonna move off of this
Yeah,
specific
yeah,
topic
yeah, yeah. I'm sorry
and
that I
never come
brought
back to
us
that
here,
again.
everybody. I apologize to all of your listeners and advertisers.
Oh, goodness gracious. They've already been like, "Hey, man, you're not talking about magic." And I'm like, "Look, it's casual. It's casually about magic. Okay, chill out.
Yeah.
Like, magic is just a Trojan horse I get to use to get people to come on the show and talk about cool things." Because this is like my almost 200th episode. This is like
Oh,
180,
nice.
100 and like 90 something episode, whatever. So I've been doing this a lot, and I've talked to a lot of people about magic. I want to talk to people about things that are also cool.
Yeah.
You know, like,
There's more cool things than
yeah,
magic, guys.
well, I say that as an official MTG ambassador and one of the people who runs the commander format, blah, blah.
Listen,
Yeah.
you dorks. Listen, you freaking dorks.
Yeah, that will lose me my advertisers.
By the way, I'm joking, guys. If you're listening to this, I have a big cardboard box of things.
Yeah.
Don't be mad. This is a bit. This is a
Yes.
bit.
Yeah, we're good, we're good. My listeners are very understanding and also enjoy things. Um, I'm gonna cut out all my coughing. The benefit of editing. Yeah, it's funny because before you pinged, like before we started, you pinged me. It's like, "Hey, can I get the link?" And I was like, yes, you can." Because I was both talking to my wife about health insurance, which is funny, and also I was killing a King Gleeok in Zelda, and that needed to take precedence over all other things because I've never killed one of those bastards before,
That's
and he
fair.
died. Yeah. It's weird, like, Zelda has taken over my life because it's, like, 400 I everybody's like, "Oh, yeah, I beat it in, like, a weekend." I'm like, "I am 450 hours into this game,
Yeah.
and I'm only barely doing the main quest lines now." It's like, "What the hell have you been doing?" Mapping every inch of the game is what I'm doing.
I'm the same way. It's sort of become, and I don't mean this in the way some people mean it negatively. It's become like a walking simulator in the
Oh,
sense of
yeah.
like I'll be like, I haven't really gone over here. I'm going to figure out what's going on. All right, I'll help this guy put up his sign. Almost like a 15-minute, 20-minute type thing versus
Yeah.
before I beat it when it was like hours and hours and hours.
Right, that's exactly what it feels very much like a Zen simulator, like, I'm
Yeah.
going around looking at flowers, cooking things, there's a dude who needs a help on a thing, sure, I'm gonna do that. There's someone who's yelling at me about Triforces, I'll deal with you later. But it's just like it's such a beautiful map and a
Yeah.
beautiful world, and you're like, "What's the rush?" It's like it's just Animal Crossing with swords, chill out, it's fine. Um, yeah, like, during pandemic, like, during lockdown, I got my Switch, like, minutes before lockdown, so it
Oh,
was like, "Okay, well, Animal Crossing and Zelda and Mario is literally all I've got," and, those are very good games if you're gonna be stuck in a hole for 2 years. Uh,
yeah.
but yeah, like, I don't know, Breath of the Wild, I wish there was more excuse for me to talk about that because that game is so good. But it also means I don't get a chance to play anything else because why would I do that? I could be cooking and Zelda things. Um, it's like that's why like I wanted to get 16, but then it's nothing like FF15, which is my favorite Final Fantasy game, and I was like, I don't want just one angry guy being angry. I can play a million games about angry guy being angry.
Yeah.
Like I want I want bros going fishing and fighting against Marlboros or whatever the hell. Um, I don't know. That's old man yelling at clouds is what that is.
I've enjoyed Final Fantasy 15. I don't love the combat system necessarily.
Yeah.
It definitely has fallen into, for all they're like, this is our Game of Thrones, man. This is going to be our Game of Thrones. Ooh, you guys thought you knew Final Fantasy. This is our Game of Thrones. It About halfway through the story, it immediately goes like full Final Fantasy story where you're like, oh, all right. Well, I guess the. I'm not going to spoil it because it's still early on, but
Yeah.
like,
Now you're the chosen one for whatever reason.
right, like the most Final Fantasy story choices are made, and it's not for the better. Um, it
So it is a Game of Thrones thing you're saying. It's like it got halfway and then got real bad.
Kind of, kind of, kind of, yeah. But the choices make a little less sense. The choices feel much more like you're like, oh, this is what you thought Final Fantasy fans wanted you to do. It. What's weird about it is it's not that it doesn't feel like a Final Fantasy game. It feels like it has no idea what it wants to be, and
Yeah.
it's like it's got like I'd say eight of the 10 parts amazing. Two of the 10 parts you're like, we could have done without these.
It's just it feels to me like they looked at like a third person action game and were like, "We want that, and
Right,
we want to put NFTs in it and this and that." It's like, bro, you make Final Fantasy games. Make a Final Fantasy game.
right,
Sit down. Everybody knows what we're getting. Kira, Firaga, we're fine. Make the game we want to play, and it'll be fine.
yeah,
But they're like, it's a lot like Hollywood. It's like, no, we're just going to give you something that's far afield, and like,
yep, 100%.
yeah,
Showbiz and the video game industry are not very different.
no, they're not. It's just, and it's so annoying, and we get paid the same, which is to say we don't. We're happy
Yep.
to work here, and there's always people behind us because people are living the dream and want to see it with their stars in their eyes. And then they're like, I will work for nothing for the joy of having my name be the 350th name in the credits line of like also
Yeah,
was here. But turns out when you actually grow up and need to eat, this is not a fun gig anymore.
yeah.
Um,
It becomes
yeah.
hard, especially like, I mean, as you get older and you're like, I don't have much in common with this 23-year-old new person who deserves the spotlight. Like I've had my little song and dance. I got to sing Mr. Cellophane. Like I don't need to have the whole movie.
Seriously, it's like, look, dude, I got to do my DDR reviews and my Mega Man reviews. Let somebody else play and do like the Stardew reviews or whatever. It's fine.
Right.
Enjoy.
Right.
But there's nowhere for us. Like in a just society, we would have a pasture to be able to go off and retire into. We don't. So that means grinding out in the comedy mines until we find a real job. Um, life.
I mean, if but like you made me think that like I want to found a retirement home that's just like a LAN party for old people.
Yes, please.
You
Like
know?
just Unreal Tournament 2000, like
Yeah.
Quake 3. Here we go. Let's just pretend it's, 2001 and you're just fine, everything's good, and we can all just log on to like, Gemstone 3 or whatever the hell.
Right. In like 30
EverQuest.
years. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, "Here, play some Prince of Persia, it's fine, we'll be okay." Um, oh god, can you like, I just sit there and I think about all these young kids who are doing, like, all this esports stuff,
Yeah.
and I'm like, "You're doing great, and it's awesome, and I wish this existed when I was younger, but also you're gonna turn, like, 26, and your wrists are no longer going to do that.
Right.
What are you going to do now?"
I mean, it's almost to me there's a corollary between a young esports players, like I'm talking people in their teens,
Mm,
and child actors, where you have the sense where it's like you're going to get a lot of fame and a lot of money really fast, and there's going to be a lot of people who could. When I say take advantage, I don't mean in the grossest way, but I mean
yeah,
like they
but
can
in
take
just
advantage of your fame and your
financially,
money. Yeah,
yeah.
and you could come out the other end being like, I'm 23 and have no skills. What happens now? And
I
it's
mean, that happens
rough.
in sports too, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
all these guys who are, like, drafted out of high school, they go into play for, like, their 10 years or whatever, and then they come out and they're like, "I don't know how to do anything."
yeah,
Um, and all of my money went to my friends.
yeah.
Yeah, but, like, our industries are not incentivized to teach people how to actually grow up. So, GG's. It's a sad state of affairs. I mean, I even look at, like, Magic. I see a lot of, like, my friends who are, like, people who made a good living, like, playing Magic and going to tournaments and grinding and everything, and then they come out the other side and they're older and they're like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna get married, I'm gonna have a family and stuff." Playing cards is not going to, pay the house mortgage and the car mortgage and whatever. Um, mm,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a real rough one. I
And
don't
then
know.
some of us are like me, where I was like, what if we never get a mortgage and we die surrounded by people we don't recognize? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what if we don't have kids? We just have a ton of amiibos.
I mean, I say that like my desk isn't covered in dice, like I've got my minis and my D&D crap, and
Right.
um yeah, my son periodically would come into here and is like, "Papa, can I play with your dolls?" I'm like, "No,
No, no,
you
get out.
definitely cannot." That is like that I will have you know is a limited edition Macross like transformable robot that I bought in Japan, kid. You don't get to play with it. Um and yeah. And he's like, "How come your toys are cooler than mine?" I'm like, "'Cause I'm old. That's why."
Because I'm cooler than you are. That's what you should say to your son. Build self-esteem.
Oh, yeah. Dude, he loves it. He's like, "How come you can't buy me Pokemon cards, but we have Magic cards coming out of every orifice of this house?" And I'm like, "First off, who taught you the word orifice? And then let's talk about, like, you're in 3rd grade. Read. We'll worry about cards later. Learn to read first." Uh,
You're like, what I need you to do is set up a Pokemon card game podcast.
or not.
Or
Or
not. Or,
really, or like move into literally anything but this, please. Find any other hobby. Like,
anything.
something that you could sell to somebody, please. Oh my goodness gracious. Anyways, man, this has been lovely chat. Thank you so much for joining me.
Of course.
Um, if people wanted to find you, your stuff, or your plugs or whatever, where could they go?
You can find me on Twitter or X or whatever it's going to be called, at Mike Drucker. I'm also on Blue Sky if you're there. Also, Mike Drucker if you're looking for me on Instagram or a lot of the other apps. It's Mike Drucker is dead because the name was taken already. That's all.
Well, RIP. It was fun knowing you, and I'm glad that you were able to come back from the great beyond for the last couple of minutes. Um, Also, yeah, you guys should really follow him. He's funny as hell. Like, I just really genuinely enjoy your Twitter feed a lot, and
Thank you.
it helps that we share political leanings, so it's not like, "Hey,"
Hey,
but it's
man.
also like DeSantis is easy to make fun of.
Yeah.
Like that guy, boy howdy, he is like, I don't know how you destroy a state in order to get second to Trump, but this is not a political show, so we're not going to go there.
No, no, no.
Anyways, my friends, as always, you can find me at Gearpuri Gears on Twitter, or you can find me on Mastodon or on Blue Sky or whatever. Just look up Shivam, you'll find it. It's not hard. You can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are sold, or at Cool Stuff Inc. on Tuesdays, or at YouTube on Tuesdays. Thank you to my editor, EK. And remember, my friends, it's not magic without the gathering, and we will see you next time.
Bye.